Hello, everybody. I'm Phoenix Perry. I am a user experience researcher, a creative director, a designer, a course leader at the University of the Arts London here in the UK, and most recently I guess you would say, creator and manager of a giant software project called InteractML, which is my interactive machine learning toolkit for Unity and Unreal. I don't know. I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. I'm also an activist, an artist, guitar player, roller skater. I'm the trouble. I'm all the trouble. All right. Without further ado, this is a review of my creative projects, and here they are. I like to think of myself as an entangled experience designer. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I think we're now in a really interesting place with technology where we have to think much bigger picture about what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And I'm going to explain how I think the decisions that we make to create our technology are really important in creating the future we want to live in. So how do I design? That's really, the question that I think when you're looking at anyone who makes things, any designer's work, you're kind of asking, like, how do they make these things, or how do they do these things? But what you're really asking is, what do I value? And throughout my work, you'll see a really strong thread of interest in social dynamics and getting people to collaborate together, and to collaborate together to have a sort of collective outcome. And the reason for this is that there's a lot of evidence that pro-social behavior makes us kinder and nicer people. And I'm often after little hacks or things we can do that will actually have an impact far after people interact with my work. So I see myself as a creator of a sort of idea that I hope stays with people. So what I'm really after is, how do we make people kinder? How do we make people a little better off than when they came to what it is that I've made? So to do this, I've thought a lot about cognition research. And during the process of doing my PhD, several theories have really become incredibly important to me. And if you thought that I was going to need to understand post-cognitive studies to do a PhD in what is effectively computer science and user experience design, I would have laughed at you, but it's actually where I kind of went. And the theories that have emerged as most important to me is kind of this body of research. I stumbled across it in my master's degree, and I didn't have words for it, and I took it to my supervisor at NYU at the time, and I'm like, what is this? How do we talk about this in experience design and user experience design? And she literally had no idea. She was like, I don't know, Phoenix, what you're on about. And over the last, I guess, 10 years, it has slowly began to get traction with other designers and other creators and other people who are interested in human-computer interaction. And a new wave has swept through human-computer interaction that I'm extremely excited about. So let me talk about these theories. So the first one that I'm really after is distributed cognition. So distributed cognition is a study of how we collaborate in groups. We actually have cognition that exists outside of our bodies in the systems we inhabit. When you begin to unlock that, what that means is that the decisions you make in one part of a society actually are really influential and can enable folks in another part to get done what they need to do or to succeed. A really good example of this is sailors on ships. Each sailor couldn't steer the entire ship entirely on their own. They understand their specific objectives. Those objectives, however, when you put them together, are able to steer these massive, massive ships. It turns out that we do a lot of this as humans. We offload our cognition into our environment. And that's really interesting and fascinating to me. Like, that's extremely fascinating. And recently, we've kind of been moving through different ways of human-computer interaction. And the new one that's emerged, and it starts peeking its head up in 2019. And I think that the groundwork for it has been really, laid in theories of embodiment or the body in space. I think it's been laid a couple of, layers deep in the sediment of human computer interaction. And that's entanglement theory. And that's the idea that we can no longer separate ourselves from our environments, each other, the technology we create. The stack is just simply, it's too deep, right? You can't say this mouse I'm using has no impact on anyone else's life. In fact, it has a huge impact on other people's lives. Same for the computers and the phones and everything else that we create or bring into the world. So we really have to begin to think about how we're entangled in our society and how our tools are entangled in us, how they're changing our ability to think, they're changing the future that we have and the options we have for making different futures. And I think this is really key to understanding how it is we move through the world. So the other kind of cognition stuff that I'm really interested in is how tools shape the mind. So this blew my mind. Like, if you would tell me what's the 5 most critical things you learned while doing a PhD, it was understanding the relationship between pragmatic and epistemic action and how epistemic action changes and impacts our cognition. So what do I mean by that? Pragmatic action is direct action. It's action we take in the world. When you throw a ball and it hits the wall, you've just done a pragmatic action. You have left a dent in your wall. Congratulations. Yay. However, epistemic action is action that changes how we actually think. It's actions that kind of unwrap new ways of thinking or new ways of being. A really good example of this is when you do long division. You write out the number you're going to divide on paper, and then you begin to do the division through the numbers and carry and move numbers across the sheet of paper. You can't remember all of the numbers along the way unless you happen to be very lucky and be a mathematical savant. But you're offloading some of that cognition, some of that remembering of what the numbers are and how to carry the mathematics off onto the page itself. And it turns out that the theory that was used to kind of look at these, how this impacts how we manipulate user experiences, it was Tetris. So not necessarily the theory, but the tool. The tool was Tetris. And the researchers who worked with it observed how people were playing Tetris. And it turns out that people were rotating the pieces in Tetris way more than was strictly necessary, which meant the ability to rotate the pieces, the ability to move and rotate the pieces changed people's cognitive abilities to solve the puzzle. And what that means is that the interfaces we make actually introduce cognitive structures in our brains. And I think that that is enormously important in the field of design, particularly when it comes to prototyping and particularly when it comes to experience design. Another one is material engagement theory. And that's where this book, Tools Shape the Mind, literally, it is an entire argument based on this. It is a long study of how from stone napping all the way to present day, we have actually had the cognitive structures in our brain change by the tools we create. And the recursive implications for us as a society and as designers, they're massive, right? So I've made a lot of machine learning generated work. I started back in, I think, 2009, 2008, 9. And recently I've been playing with some disco diffusion stuff. So I had to throw it in just for fun. But to the left, I asked this machine learning text prompt generation system, what does the future look like? And I get the image to the left. And the image on the left really bothers me for a lot of reasons. One, there's no people in it, right? 2, this is the future we've been imagining. So much so that this science fiction dystopia is embedded into our very the very future, the very edge of image generation technology. It's embedded itself into the collective imaginings of our data sets. And that really scares me. That's a moment that we've thought a lot about the future being a dystopian space with no trees, no nature, no people. And then to the right, I asked it what a sustainable future would look like. And I got this. And I think if I had to choose which one of these worlds to live in, I would choose the one on the right. And designing text prompts for these image generation systems is something I'm really fascinated in right now. So without further ado, I'm going to show you my own work and take you on the journey that I have gone on to try and make pro-social interfaces which increase so many good things in our society. And I think that they bring about happier people. And I want to make more of these interfaces. And I want to really think about collective play in ways in which we can empower groups of people. So this is an early prototype. And I'm going to show you this because it's going to go all the way through my most recent project pre-pandemic. This is Night Games. So Night Games was my very first attempt to take an experiment that I had made for myself, which was a gesture-based musical system that used a lot of machine learning, a ton of sensors, and it let me kind of manipulate a record that I'd made with my bandmate without having to use a computer on stage with, nothing in front of me except for a camera watching. And this was really important to me because I find bending over laptops extremely painful. I have a disability in my spine that actually made it completely impossible for me to be a laptop DJ. I needed an embodied way of interacting with my technology. And this was my solution. And I decided to take that solution and put it in the hands of children. What would happen if I gave them this environment, which was a 3D world that I'd made in Unity, and then I let them navigate it using gesture and driving the sonic experience that they created. So it was an explorable sonic landscape driven by social play and character. My friend Colin, very good-natured person, drew this monster and agreed to dress up like this, which I gave him a bunch of images of Muppets, and I was like, I want something that's kind of Muppet-ish. And he came up with this character, and he worked with a friend of his who is a costume designer in New York, and they made this wonderful character. And this character led itself around this sonic landscape, which I had created with my partner, Margaret Schadell, and my friend, David Last. And different gestures were embedded on the sensors in the PS Move. So you could rotate them in different ways, and different games would open up, or different sounds would open up. I'm going to show you something that I think is really important in a second, which is a video of all this working when I got really lucky and at another event that isn't the one in the photos. A couple months later, I had a drum corps show up, which if you make a collaborative social experience, having a drum corps that's, sound driven, having a drum corps show up is really the way. So what I did from this kind of experiment is I was really interested in looking at and making note of the games that the kids made. And then I wanted to design my experience and I didn't really know mine was a performance tool, right? How did I take a performance tool and turn it into something that was, something that was actually cool and fun to interact with? So I watched all these kids and I had a lot of conversations with them. I got a lot of video of Colin talking to them and trying to understand how they're playing. And on the left, you'll see 2 mini games that I've got a PDF with a ton of them jotted down on the emergent games that the kids kind of created in the scene. And I'm really interested about how I can look at what people are doing, observe what they're doing, reflect on what they're doing, and create experiences around the social structure that they're building through play. The next prototype that I made from that idea and kept calling Night Games, and you'll see that there's a theme throughout my work. I am like the you know, I think it's a, is it a category? No, it's not a category. Oh God, I'm the Katamari Damacy of game designers and interaction designers. I roll up anybody I happen to like into whatever project I'm working on. And that's because I really get excited about people I meet and different skills and interests they have. And I try and involve them in anything I'm making. So you're going to see everything I've worked on. It's got like a long list of collaborators. And you'll see here that I rolled up Adele Lynn and Sophie Kravitz into this fun experience. Oh no, Adele's name's not on the slide. It should be. I will fix that before I send it over. But I was really interested in how the free-flowing play that I saw previously could also work with the structured games that I was seeing. So one of the games I saw the kids make was a kind of capture the flag style video game thing where they tried to, you know, essentially take control over all the moves. So they would kind of try and grab them from each other and kind of hoard them up and then try and work out what sounds they made. So I kind of tried to make a capture the flag game with the moves. So you'll see here that the moves have a different color on them. And I have these pyramids above, and essentially you could turn each move the color of your move by just holding a light to it. And that super loose structure existed in the freeform play experiences. So how do you kind of do these things at the same time? How do you have freeform play and structure? Great. This is Adele. She's in a lot of photos. Adele and I have been working together for so many years now. And Adele and I also were curious about what we could do. So Adele is a designer who's after my own heart. I feel like Adele and I have a lot of affinity. It's probably why we've collaborated for going on 10 years now. We were really interested in like making things out of garbage, which you'll see as a theme in my work, making beautiful things out of trash. I have many things that have actually just been made entirely out of garbage. But this is an example. We took some boxes and then we put these little plastic, we had found some disused acrylic and we cut out circles in it. We made it so you could slide them in and out. And we were both really interested in like, does every experience have to be digital or can it be a merging of the physical and the digital in a way that lets for some impromptu, some behavior you haven't scripted. Cool. So here's some more shots of it. You can get a sense of it. There were some bracelets that did the same thing as the move. They ended up not working very well. I didn't realize it before I taped them up, how bright the green LED from the Arduino was going to be. This was a lesson. But they look cool on the NYC subway train ride home. And you can see over in the bottom corner, there's someone who's like worked out that they can like pair them together and they've both gone green in that photo, which is, they also did go green. They went that nice shade of green, not the awful bright green in the photo above. We really tried to get the LEDs to look cool. So the one problem that this prototype presented, and even the prototype above, was people really being able to pick out what sound they were making. People enjoyed the play experience, but they didn't necessarily, they weren't able to lock onto it. So like the video that I showed earlier of the drum corps, I can hear the folks in the back that are kind of not on beat, but it's because I know what sounds they're making. And I don't think they had any clue. And you can hear people hold the move to their ear, which I thought was really fascinating. And to this day, I still want to put speakers in interfaces. I don't know why I haven't done it. Probably just, I don't know, lack of time. Who knows? But it is something that I keep saying I'm going to do and I haven't done. But I was curious, Adele and I were in Amsterdam and we decided to take this idea and we got offered a show and we thought, let's take something from Night Games. Let's take the cool acrylic and let's make one thing in the center of the room and let's make the interactions super direct. Like you can't miss what they're doing. And how does that change how people play? And we observed that.
Because it's like you bring the melody together.
Exactly. That's the I should It's actually the first time I've even heard the sound through speakers. The best is like sometimes like a flash. so from there, we submitted a grant to a nonprofit called Harvest Works. They gave us a grant. We blew out a prototype of that prototype of actually the tree that's down there in the right hand corner. Let us get a big show in Berlin. And Adele and I did not have much time. We basically had this show that we did in Amsterdam, I think in like, mid-spring. And by summer, we had maybe actually, I guess it would have been like around February when we did the one that you saw earlier. And then by April, we had to have this big version made, which she and I were both, we learned some things, but we had some questions about how group play could kind of support discovery and exploration. So we wanted to work out how to like link these different sound making objects together using rotation, using gesture, using interaction. And we had this idea of building this low poly video game world in the middle of an art gallery. And they told us it was going to be in a white box theater. They agreed to our very detailed, Adele was an accountant before working with me. And now Adele's a machine learning researcher. But Adele's super organized. She sent over all of the things that we would need, all the, and it just turned out to be so much harder for the festival to get things for us. And a large part of that had to do with accessibility of resources in Germany. Turns out most of the things that we needed to make this were locked up behind guild licenses, which was a whole situation. So we had a week on site to assemble, to cut, make, buy, assemble this entire sculpture. And this was the height of my foolhardiness. But in the end, we managed to get bits and pieces of it working. And the tree with the rock, which is here, the rock, I'm really proud of this rock. This rock is really fun. It pops open and inside is a compartment, and the compartment wirelessly connected via radio to our system and had an accelerometer inside of it, which was cool. So, and some LEDs, and you'll see it here. So. How do you learn from like glorious, massive amounts of failure, right? That's really what I came to understand was, what do you do when you absolutely wipe out, and you wipe out like large, like not minor, large. Look at the look on my face here. It's abject terror. You wipe out in front of your entire community. So this was, Adele and I didn't sleep for 5 days. I think by the end of it, we were both ready to fall over and die. And we learned a lot, but we learned so much from this experience in how we were going to stage it the next time we had an option. And the heartbreak about this is it got boxed for 5 years because we didn't get any really significant documentation. And so many people who were curators witnessed it gloriously collapse. The art gallery moved us outside at the last minute, which was an experience that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Going from being in a white box gallery to losing the white box gallery before you turn up, basically, and like by the time you land, it is outside. Building electronics outside, I learned so much from this experience. I learned how to make things super robust. So now a lot of my stuff doesn't break. And it was because I learned how to handle for dust. I learned to handle for just really everything that could go wrong going wrong. I learned how to network European guild licensing systems, which was something I wasn't prepared for. I learned a lot about how player interaction in loud environments needed to work. And I learned so much, and you'll see this carried through in my next project, Bot Party, what voices cut through noise. Cool. So this is the final prototype of what I believe was the Night Games journey. It took a decade for it to get this good. And by the time it hit, maybe not quite, like right under a decade, it took 9 years for this project to become just the absolute jaw dropper that I think it was always meant to be. And this is it at the Welcome Collection, Permission to Play, London, UK. And the permission to play show itself was like coming home. I felt like I was finally being shown with my influences. And, Buckminster Fuller's downstairs, and they're talking about architecture and indie games, and our work was upstairs. And I just felt really connected to the entire experience. And I rolled up a whole bunch of new collaborators for this. Robin Baumgarten, who's made a game called Line Wobbler, Federico Fasce, Adele, and then a new friend called Ben Kelly. And Ben he's an amazing sound artist, and he has been working with the indigenous people in the Amazon to really help raise awareness on their sound ecology and how the environment that they're within is being clear cut. And he's made a open source sound resource, so there's a record of what their environment sounded like before it's completely destroyed, which is probably, they're fighting, but it's a possibility. And he's placed it on collection in the British Library. And one of the things that you'll hear in this piece is a kind of integration of Ben's work into the idea, which was Forest Daydream, which is this low poly forest from a video game built in the real world. So what we did with this is we started with the weather, and we started in the morning, and the different games that were embedded on the different pieces required multiple people to play. And as you unlock the different games, the weather advanced throughout the day. So you would go from morning all the way to night. And you'll see that's what all the different lighting is. I tried to get one of everyone, but the blue one here is the rainstorm. The pink one is when you've gone and you're in day and you're trying to like go between all the trees. So there's like this pink tree game where you have to kind of run around the room faster than you can physically move to get to the pink trees in time. So it requires kids to kind of point at each other and make teams, and this kind of team collaboration. And then this child here is working out that the dome has 5 different tones around it, and after you've turned them all on, it makes this really beautiful harmonic, and the LEDs and the inside the dome go a little, sparkly and magical. And that's one of the weather states. Cool. So I'm going to show you a video, and what I think is different about this video is I wouldn't have gotten to the forest bath thing myself, but I decided to take my ideas and start collaborating with a huge group of students. So I wrote this unit called Advanced Computational Environments. And what this unit does, I wrote an MSc, which is, first of all, I wrote a master's degree at the Creative Computing with Ben Stouffer. And that's that's my job now. Make your own job. And on this program, students really think about how to create social play experiences, and they make one with me, and then the idea is that they go off and then make one on their own, it's been really rewarding to see them go from like tiny exhibit or whatever I'm happening to get roped into to their own exhibits, and I love it. But I brought them into this process, and I'll show you a video about that. We play as creatures in this world. We play to test our limits. We play to see how things fit. We often experiment in play and try things out in play that we wouldn't feel safe doing if the context was removed.
It's really an attitude with which you engage in the world.
By playing, you can create something new, or you experience something that you didn't expect.
Hello, I am Phoenix Perry, and I'm the course leader here on the Creative Computing degree at the Creative Computing Institute. This is a project called Forest Daydream, which is the 3rd iteration of a project that I've been working on for several years with many different collaborators. It is a long-term research agenda that I've had to look at social play in groups and collaboration in groups. So the project itself involves a couple of pieces. There is a small forest, which looks like a low poly video game forest, and a small hut, which looks like a low poly video game hut. My thinking behind that is that we spend a lot of time in virtual natural environments when we live in cities. So pulling where we actually end up going back out into the real world and looking at it as an object. So that's why it looks the way it does and the kind of architecture it has. Beyond that, each piece is interactive, and then there are games which play out amongst the pieces, and they require multiple people to play. So something will be happening over here, and then you'll need a response to it over here. So there's no way to play it on your own, so you have to ask for help and ask for cooperation, which is one of the underlying philosophical points I'm trying to make in the game, is that you can't do things on your own, you need to do them in groups. We have this class here that I'm leading right now on environmental computing and spatial computing. They are working with me on this project in an attempt to get experience working with a gallery, with a large-scale institution like Wellcome Collection. So it's part of the pedagogical process of getting them from point A to point B, of being ready and able to work with the public and knowing what that looks like. Then from there, they're going to proceed to doing full-scale works all on their own in public spaces.
Personally, I was rather focused on the programming of the microcontrollers. All the different parts have to interact with each other, have to talk with each other. So every button press has to be signaled somewhere else, and all the different parts have to be coordinated into one single game.
You've got sounds going on and lighting and all these physical models. So these really create an environment. I hope people coming would feel relaxed.
I worked on the soldering and the wiring, and I also helped with the construction of the dome and the trees. You are not designed for yourself, so you need to study how others behave and interact.
My name's Ben Kelly. My role in Forest Daydream, it was almost like a sound supervisor role to create an immersive soundscapes which evoke the rainforest, and also music composition. Los Boscasinos is an ongoing project with the Wampi, the indigenous community who live near the Ecuadorian border of the Amazonas rainforest. I spent some time with them 2 years ago and developed an ongoing relationship as an artist to help with their government, to help deforestation and indigenous land rights. The sound recordings, the soundscapes are very immersive, as again a hyper reality, to try and aim to trigger this emotional feeling, this primal feeling of interconnectivity with nature. I hope it stimulates audience members to ask themselves questions of their own role within the social ecological system.
We need outlets for social collaboration communication as adults, and we don't get them enough. And we really have to think about how play sits in a modern society in new ways. That is this piece, which was a huge deal for me, and I'm so grateful that it finally got completed. Why do you make people make music together, you ask? What's the point of having these people make collaborative music and build environments that they're accomplishing tasks for? Well, it turns out research shows that after we collaborate making music together, we are more pro-social for several hours after. So after you play one of these experiences, you are more likely to exhibit positive behavior towards your fellow human being. And I think that's worth all the effort. Okay, so Bot Party! Dun 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 dun! Bot Party is really fun. Bot Party was me kind of going down this same journey at a very similar point in time. So there's a lot of overlapping themes. But what I made is actually pretty significantly different in some ways. But you're going to easily see that there's an emergent theme amongst the pieces that I've shown. I make 10 briefs a semester around prototyping and physical computing, make an interface out of moss, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't include any of that stuff. So I've definitely carried what you're saying into the collection of work, which is mostly in my doctorate. So I'm going to kick it off now with Bot Party, so you're looking at an analog synthesizer up here and a step sequencer down here and a ridiculous, silly amp that is in the style of a Marshall amp, even though it runs on 2 AA batteries here. So I want to show you this video that was made by Goldsmiths, which was where I was at before UAL.
This is my project. It's called Bot Party, which is going to be a distributed modular synthesis environment, and it will be debuting at Somerset House as part of the 2017 version of Now Play This, which I'm very excited about. It is part of a much larger research project that I've been working on for years about making music with children who don't know how to make music and teaching them that their impact on a collective environment causes implications for the whole of the environment that they're within. There'll be a ton of different patch cables, and the idea is that the children will be able to patch different modules to each other, and the units will actually have speakers in them. So they'll hear their sound as they move through the space, and then they'll choose who they connect to, and who they connect to will impact and change the sounds they're making. And it's also a really fun way to explain how sound gets created. So it's a sound education tool as much as it is an art project. I think the fact that it's really just playful and joyful, people just walk up and go crazy and turn all the knobs. It's not intimidating in any way. And I think often, when you see big music creation systems, they're kind of a little bit overwhelming and they're a little bit intimidating, and you don't want to break anything. But this isn't going to have that problem. People are going to just want to touch it and play with it as a result of how it looks and how it interacts. So to me, that's really exciting, and I'm really excited. I'll be really excited watching children play it.
I originally debuted it at a cool exhibition in Holland, in Tilburg, called The New Intimacy, and it was an exhibition around intimacy and human connection, and it also featured a lot of women in games, so that was a cool show, and I was really interested in how making music together increases pro-social behavior, and this is really the bigger idea: is can we use oxytocin to design for love? And what I mean by that is, can we have design loops which de-escalate conflict and increase not only our sense of cohesion to a social norm, but our sense of caring for an environment that we're within? And that is a kind of deeper philosophical value that I'm asking myself with a lot of the design choices I make. And I do believe that that's going to help us bring about, if we can do it enough, a much better world. So Bot Party, you'll see there are a couple failures here and a couple lessons. I learned a lot, but mostly that people weren't collaborating enough. So I started thinking, you heard me talk about it in the last video, but between showing it and then making that video, I was doing just a lot of rapid prototyping. I was taking all kinds of different little bots and trying to work out how to attach them together. And some of my patch cable tests I did with string and tape, as you do. So I had little boxes that I very quickly laser cut, which are here on the left. And I was just using, in this case, this is wire. This is actually hooked up and works. But originally I was literally just using string, and I quickly found that the string became a giant tangle of mess. And there was no way I was going to give this to kids without the patch cables getting ripped up, the synthesizers being destroyed, and the entire thing falling flat on its face. And after I learned from Amaze, I was not going to put myself in that situation again. I wanted a bulletproof design. And the other thing that I really took away from Forest Daydream is that if I really wanted to reach a lot of people, I had to be able to put it in a suitcase. So I designed this experience intentionally to basically go in a carry-on. So once I realized the patch cables weren't going to work, I had to come up with another idea. So that's when I got the idea that all the interaction could happen between touching different people. So when we were patching the patch cables, that was kind of already happening because people were helping each other. At my hack space, they were very generously my guinea pigs. and I noticed that people were touching each other. So I decided to turn that touch mechanic into the interaction for the game. And I worked with some research. There's this really cool paper by Disney called Touche, and it explains in it a rough theory for how to use capacitive touch and be able to identify it, specific touches. And that's what I implemented here with Bot Party. So it's not a makey or anything you've likely seen. It's actually some filter math, and I'm able to tell who's touching what bot. Well, not who, but I'm able to tell who's holding who, being kind of rough there. I'm able to tell if player 1 is touching player 2, touching player 3. For example, I can delineate between 1 and 3, which is different than like anything else. And I can also tell if everybody's holding hands, which gave me some really interesting behavior to design for. And the other thing I did is I put accelerometers and gyroscopes and stuff. I put IMUs in them. And that let me know if they're being picked up or rotated, which let me take all the gestural goodness from night games and roll it into these boxes. So here you'll see at Somerset House, this was the show. Now Play This is a huge game show in London. It's a part of London Games Week. It's thousands of people come through. So I'd have thousands of people use this. So I wrote a little story about human intelligence. So the story goes that these little bots are wearing disguises, and they're trying to trick humans into playing with them so they can be retrained by the artificial intelligence on how to have human intelligence. And I thought that was a fun little story twist. And they're just, trying to retrain the HI and how to exist. So, hi, here we go. Yes, I'm very cheesy. Cool. So you'll see some interaction here. People are moving and shaking the boxes. And of course, that's making sound. And one of the things that I mentioned that I learned during night games was that what sounds are clearly identifiable. Did some research on this, and it turns out voices, animal voices and human voices are really, they'll cut through, because of the spectrum that they sit in, they'll cut through basically anything. So you'll see that I have put, first of all, animal sounds, and then later a different sound, which I'll spoil it now. Little yes, a little affirmation, because everybody loves to be told yes. Into the bots. So you'll see here that, again, I was really interested in how to trigger weather. When all 3 people touch each other, you get a beautiful rainstorm, and then there's different sounds and animals in each group, and they're all corresponding with the little disguises the bots are wearing. So it turns out we need touch. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second, but this is kind of interfaces. And I'm going to show, after Now Play This, I've got a long history of submitting myself to exhibitions and not having anything, and then getting in the exhibition and having to rapidly make a project. So that's what we have here is I submitted the first prototype to GDC, got in, and really wanted to upgrade and change it. So in between the two, we shot this video, and I will give it a run so you guys can see and hear the sounds in the boxes that were at Somerset House.
Scan to box.
Bot Party is 3 boxes, and inside each box there are 2 LEDs, a button, an accelerometer, but most importantly, there are 2 custom-made sensors on 2 sides of the box. These sensors are able to detect touches between boxes if people hold hands. So, yeah, there you go. I want people to understand that they impact the environment they're within, and that their interactions and their conversations between each other form a collective whole. Like, I think this one is, there's a great deal of social phobia that people have, particularly around touching each other or hugging each other or just being warm and friendly. I believe games can tell stories and empower people in really meaningful and interactive ways. Games should really expand how we think and how we see our world and give us opportunities to do things that we can't do safely in normal life.
I got it into GDC, and then we got nominated for a GDC award, which if you told me I was going to get nominated for a GDC award for getting people to hold hands, I would have laughed at you, but weirder things have happened. So this is Bot Party. The best part is I lost the competition to a former student who had worked with similar ideas. So I felt like I won, even though I didn't win, which was I give everyone here, I hope that experience happens to you, because it's incredibly joyful, because not only do you get nominated for this super cool thing, but then you watch your student also get nominated, and then you watch your student win. And that was pretty darn amazing, I gotta say. We got a bunch of press. That's it in The Verge. So this is it. People made a lot of fan art. I love the picture on the right, because it was a Twitter image that this woman put up of herself holding the bot, and then she put this little emoji on it, and that gave me all the warm feels. And after this, I basically did a lot of traveling. The game was really successful, and in about a year, I let over 3,000 people physically touch me, which really fundamentally changed how I see reality. It will crack your heart like wide open in 1,000 directions. So I encourage everyone here to just have casual contact with their fellow human being. I found that we need touch. It is a huge missing factor in our society, and interfaces which can help us collaboratively do things together make us bigger than our individual selves. And I also found that there are a lot of people super hungry just for any physical contact. I would see one of those people, maybe once every 3 or 4 shows, and you could feel it. You could feel the hunger and the sadness and the loneliness that these people are holding. And I really think if we can work on that as designers, that's a really good challenge to go after. So here is this crazy experiment. So the best thing is you could form giant chains of people. And I have some fun video of that, which I want to show. And I'm going to show some playthrough of just different events and parties. So little bots, when you got there are 2 forms of play, as you'll see. I got wise to this little situation with night games, and I continue to do it, where there's a free form environment and then a structured game. Charlie, who is in the red dress there, worked with me on this, and we called the touch-based game Little Secret Ciphers, as the bots are training you to pass information quicker and quicker through their networks. And I'll play this here. Oh, cool. So I hope what you take away from that is actually something really cool, and that I've been studying all the different emergent play styles. And the one that you saw next to last with the arms all together, I've seen that emerge a bunch of times where people have worked out that's a way to beat the system. And the different strategies people have emerged, I've kept a note of all of them, and I've been reflecting on all of them. I'm about to roll haptics into it. It has another show, I think, next week. God help me. Touching a ton of people post-pandemic is going to get real. I'm not even sure how to handle it. There'll be a lot of hand sanitizer involved, and a lot of safety procedures. I may ask people to wear masks just because, but I'm very excited for it. It's really cool. Here in London, we have a lot of vaccinations. It's not the US, but still, I think I'm gonna, I'm having mixed feelings about showing it again. But yeah, I think people need this. I think they need it now more than ever. All right, so here's some cool videos. Yes, you can see them. Awesome, cool photos. This place was awesome. This place had an upside down McDonald's sign and a light up dance floor. That was maybe one of my favorite places I've shown it. So now I'm gonna show Thrum, which is kind of failed experiment that kind of kicked off around the same time as Bot Party that I don't know what I'm gonna do with. But I know it's a long-standing interest of mine just as much as the music stuff, and that is I have a huge fascination with haptics and vibration and bees and really experiencing our reality in more than human ways. And I started that originally. It was what took me. I used to be a filmmaker, and what brought me to video games and making playful experiences and interfaces in the first place was a game about hive behavior and colony collapse. So Thrum is a giant game that is a haptic grid. And what I'm trying to get people to do with my friend Heather Kelly is work out how in the hot sauce you can navigate using haptics in a group. So we had this idea to build this massive haptic floor. And there are 27, if memory serves correctly, motors in this thing. Maybe 20. 4 times 7 is, oh, good God. 28? Yeah, 4 times 7. Don't make me do math while I'm trying to talk at the same time. So yeah, you'll see all the motors there in the illustration on the bottom middle. And then on the bottom right, that's what the tiles look like when you flip them up. So this project was really cool. I CNC'd all of it myself, which was a huge endeavor to work out how to channel all the wires and stuff. And you'll see this is the first prototype of it, first circuit board, which I learned a lot about how distribution of motors can stack up blowback current from this project, more than I ever wanted to learn. My diodes in this project were just not sufficient to do the job. I thought I could get away with tiny diodes. It turned out you absolutely cannot. It's actually, you need much bigger diodes than I had suspected. You'll see these itty bitty tiny diodes here. It's a huge mistake because actually the current blowback is exponential and not linear, which caused some motor drama, as you can imagine. Overheated some motors, but here you can kind of get a sense of all of the fun motors, and people were trying to like understand how they moved. And I saw all these really cool behaviors that I have notes on, mainly this like tapping behavior, but people were successfully able to follow the bees around, which was cool. And you know, I was really curious what it would be like if I've played it in pitch dark, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. Because it's got this sound component to it. It's really, really fun. So I'll play this. And then just like, was really interesting, and there's so much here to explore that needs to get explored. I haven't done it yet. I need to start showing it again. The new prototype I have of it goes back to my suitcase theory, because moving this around Europe was prohibitive. It's super heavy, and assembling it takes 24 hours, and I had the Amaze Night Games problem. And now I'm trying to make it with craft foam and tiny, tiny, tiny motors to see if I can make the tiles super soft and squishy and small. That's where it's at. And I have no idea how long this project will go on for or how many iterations or variants of it I will make. But one thing is certain, once I get an idea in my head, I really want to keep playing with it. Cool. So now I'm going to show some awesome classroom experiments. I'm really interested. I have a whole pedagogy that I've designed around transformation and how to use reflection to get us there. So I'm working on a book. I have a contract for it. It's like a year out. I should have been done this year. Shh, can't hear it. And it is about my teaching practice and how I think about interfaces. And the thing that I've been seeing is that if you teach people the history of where these interfaces come from, and give them the theories around these interfaces, the design theories, the deeper theories around why we make what we make, et cetera, et cetera. I've recently been teaching them a lot about dialogue, and you'll see that I do a lot of observation of my interfaces. I hope you could tell that from above, but I'm really interested in watching what people do, then designing around it, and I do that all the time. And I'm trying to get people to understand that there are all these design theories behind all the things we make. So you teach them all these great theories, and then you have them make the thing, because procedural knowledge is not the same as declarative knowledge. Procedural knowledge is knowledge you get through doing. And my students only learn embodiment through making and doing. So this year I got really into hands and extending the body and ways in which we could extend the body with puppetry. And I made this sensor out of trash in my studio. Hope you like it. It's craft foam Velostat, which I brought a whole roll, whole bolt, not just like a little bit. We're talking like a bolt of it back from New York to London on the plane, a fabric bolt. So I got to find out something to do with this. So I had my class make some sensors. It didn't even begin to scratch the amount of Velostat I need to work with, that maybe I'll put it in Thrum or do something fun with it later. So I had my students make the sensor, which is just a couple layers of things. It's a bend sensor, and then put it on their hands, then put it on the puppet hands, and move the puppet and see the way their cognition slipped and moved between the way that they felt it was ready to hand when they were moving the puppet versus when they were on their own hand, and the different forms of control they had. And of course I had them sonify it. So this is some of the examples. Some of the students got really inspired by the brief and went way out there, which was super exciting. Some of them made puppets you could control that had capacitive sensors on them. This one was really fun. This one was really cool because it took a lot of the things from the puppets and made parts of the body that you could then move on the puppet. So it was even more than just the hand. And they all made sound and did fun things. And this one required 2 or 3 people to play it to get the puppet to move around. And that made me really happy. So here is kind of just like the random assortment of stuff. Remember I said Bot Party was a sound education game? It turns out to be that. This is a kit that I ended up making for Do It Kits, which Helen Steer had as a business for a while. She went around the UK teaching GCSE curriculum to students and working with teachers to introduce making into the classroom. This synthesizer which uses oscillation, was used to teach physics to 7th graders. It was very fun. And we packaged it up in a beautiful kit and everything, but this is the kind of prototype of it at a exhibition called the Festival of Stuff. Over here is a weird, I don't know why I tried to do this one day. I was teaching, quite bored, teaching motors. And I decided to try and emulate this instrument from electronic history that moves a motor up and down a copper coil and measures the different changes of resistance. It is an unnecessary trope, given now we have other ways of doing that. But it was fun, and it was cool to make sound with, and I don't know, fun afternoons. I do a lot of that where it's just I'm in the studio and God knows what will happen. I made a stuffy that made sound down here in the bottom. You can see me putting it together. The right is our desk at the makerspace. My God, it was wild. It just kept getting weirder and weirder, and there kept being more stuff on it. And eventually it was bad. There ended up being a whole room behind it. And to the left, you'll see a games library. I'm pretty proud of this. That's a wheelchair accessible cabinet. And I also worked with Goldsmiths to create a games library with 40,000 games in it. That was a process. And there's a cool paper or two about it and what it means to collect video games in an institutional setting. So that was a fun example of working with a big institution. So why games? I'm really curious who controls the story, who controls the narrative of our culture. So back to my fun text prompts. This is the world now, and it's pretty bad. This is bleak. I don't want to live here. And I think it says a lot about, what this data set thinks is going on in the world. So I think it's really important to diversify and expand the number of people who have access to narrative. So Code Liberation is a nonprofit I started with Nina Friedman, Jane Friedhoff, and Kat Small. Later it included Carolyn Sanders, Adele Lynn, and a host of other people. And this nonprofit taught around 6,000 people to make video games for free over about 10 years. And the idea wasn't that I was just teaching them how to code. The idea was I was teaching them how to have the ability to tell really compelling stories about their experience. So I was really interested in how to make inclusive opportunities for storytellers. And you'll see that to the left here is an exhibition at the V&A, and we worked together to have a residency there. 17 different games came out of this, I think, something like that. And you'll see that they were exhibited at the V&A as part of the V&A Late Series. Over to the right, there's an exhibition at the BFI, which the BFI is the British Film Institute. We had another residency there where we exhibited some games. And I just really loved the stories that came out of these folks and the voices that I helped them uncover, and, you know, not really uncover, just give opportunities to exist in the world all in like a published game platform. So I taught game engine skills, but really what I was doing was helping them get their head around how to use these platforms to take the stories they already had and bring them to a bigger audience. Yeah, that was rad. That went on for years. Super fun, really transformative, changed my life. I could show you this fun video, but probably if you want to watch a bunch of women tell you about how code liberation and collaborative storytelling is the future, you can watch that later. Cool. So this is a MOOC we made called Create Expressive Video Games, which was a intersectional feminist approach to game design. It's up on FutureLearn. You can take the first, you can take it for free as long as you do it within the time it would take to complete. And now I want to go back and revise it because I hit my bottom with user-centered design. I'm super glad that Don Norman came out and said that it needs to go, it needs to evolve. And I want to include that in whatever I do next. So final thing I'm going to show you is a project on cryptech. So I mentioned earlier, I've had disability. I have a dark history with Silicon Valley. I really destroyed my body working in the original .com boom. Destroyed. I had lumps on my spine. My whole body was busted. I spent 5 years on disability in the Bay Area, cobbling my joints back together from the gigantic amount of nerve damage that I still suffer from in my right hands and my left hands. I guess I only have one right hand and one left hand, but you get the idea. And what I learned from that, and you'll see it, is like a kind of theme that's emerged throughout everything, is I have an approach to technology. And I'm starting to understand that other disabled designers also have a very aligned approach to tech. And a sort of movement is beginning to start, and it's being called cryptech. And it's other technologists and designers who have disabilities. And this gives me so much faith. So I talked about gesture in embedded interfaces. Over here, this is me running curb cuts through the machine learning system. And I think it's really telling that the curb cut's all screwed up, because that feels accurate to me. Cities rolling out curb cuts and not really maintaining them. Yeah, that feels right. So cryptech, this is a piece of cryptech I made. It is called InteractML. It takes all the strategies I use to make that embodied interface, which guess what? Turns out I actually needed, because I couldn't hold a mouse and my arms were super whacked. I still use a lot of voice control. I still use a lot of Wacom's. It's why I started making interfaces in the first place. I realized that our interfaces should never cause harm. And the fact that interfaces caused me so much harm was like a really humbling experience. And that's kind of my reason for being as a designer. And what I value most is the facilitation of new and more diverse and more inclusive ways of making and creating technology. So InteractML, It is a machine learning.
This is our InteractML regression demo. Here we see panels showing the information about the data being recorded. In this case, the player position is our input values. The training panel shows the training status, and the run panel is the output of the running model. As the player moves around, you can see the input values changing based on the position. If we run the model, we can see the output. As we move from left to right, goes between 0 and 1. This model is currently trained on 1 being down the right hand side of the map and 0 being down the left hand side of the map. We also have the output value visualized as a material parameter change on the sphere at the back of the map. If we stop the model running and delete the current examples, we can record a new set. Initially, with the expected output at 1, we record some positions at the front of the map, setting the expected output to 0 and recording a load of examples around the outside of the map. This is our example data set which we train the model on. And once again, when we run, we can see the output blending between 1 at the front of the map and 0 at the periphery. Here we have our dynamic time warp demo. This is pre-trained on over 70 example numbers. And as we can see, a series of input values generated by a gesture drawn on the input panel. The model is run on this input data and matched against the trained examples. We even train for multiple stroke configurations present in variants of standard numbers.
Okay, so this is the semaphore test environment, which is actually to teach you how to do semaphore, and we've just started developing this. So you can see there's a mirror that's in front of me, which has the semaphore flag positions. I've got my semaphore flags in my hand, and on the left there's like a little tile, and the tile gives me the output. So this machine learning system has been trained with all the letters, so I'm hoping that I can actually spell out words and things like that. So I'm just going to start with the alphabet, and I'm just going to run the system now. So it's going to give me A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and then Q, and then R, S. So if I go to a space, I should be able to spell epic. E, let's see, P, I, it's quite challenging, C. Okay.
So that's the InteractML demo, and with that I'll come back to me. Hey, I've been sitting here, it's 100 degrees in London today, it's crazy, I'm so hot, my hair's like melted to my face. Yeah, that project was huge. Often I end up managing a whole team of people, and this is a really good example. There were postdoc researchers, there were PhD students, there were developers that I hired, and artists, and there was an artist in residency program. It just went on and on. There was an exhibition, there was a conference, on and on and on and on. So often InteractML it spiraled, and it ended up being part of a much larger grant project that I did with a whole team of amazing people, including Marco Gillius and Rebecca Feebrink, and you saw Ruth and Bruno there, and it was just super cool and really great. And it was so inspiring to me to know that a tool that I needed to make music with, and I started like really early on, back when nobody knew why artists might want to use machine learning. Everyone looked at me like I was mad. Everybody was into their point clouds. I'm like, why are you using point clouds with the Connect? That seems very dumb. There's already a machine learning algorithm in it. Why aren't you just training it? Like, what? I didn't understand. So I was using a camera before that, which, let me tell you, camera data can be much more accurate than volumetric data if you de-res it. But to see all that, this thing I needed that I was using as essentially assistive technology become so useful for, we have InteractML now has like over 40,000 users. That was kind of cool, kind of a big deal. So yeah, this is what I make. I run a master's degree, manage a team, have a good time. You get a sense of it. All right, this is my work. That's enough of me. Thanks. Bye.